Welcome back. I'm Veronique Mandel, and you're watching The Right Stuff here on CFTV. My guests on the show are Peter Rastovic and Vanessa Shields, two local poets. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about all sorts of great inspirational things. And I was asking Peter how he got published and when. What about you? When did you first get published?
So the first time I got published was, I think I was 12 years old, and the Windsor Star had a poetry contest, and the theme was spring, and my title of the poem was Spring, and I think I got like second place or something, and that was the first time that I got published. And Marty was there. That was the first time I met Marty, and then it wasn't until years later that we connected again. But yeah, and then I was published throughout high school and also in university. I worked at the Lance. I was the arts editor, best job ever, and so was able to get published a lot that year. But you know, in literary magazines and sort of higher end things like that, it's been a challenge. I haven't had too much published that way, but I'm always trying and I'm always submitting, and I've sort of shifted to writing book reviews now, in hopes that I can, if the poetry's not getting in there, maybe I could review other people's poetry and get published that way. So,
I mean, getting published is probably the most difficult thing for writers of any genre.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, whether you're writing short stories or novels or poetry, I mean, it's a huge thing because you want other people to read your stuff,
right?
Right? It comes out of your heart, and you want to share it.
Yep, exactly.
Well, it's like the great confessional, right? When your poetry gets published, any of your writing gets published, and you have to be able to accept criticism.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yes.
It makes you stronger one way or another. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And never fear rejection, because, I mean, most of us could paper walls with rejection slips.
Oh yeah.
So, speaking of sharing, let's do some sharing. Vanessa, would you like to go first? There were, as you can see from the tabs, I liked a number of things in I Am That Woman, and every single woman out there would love to read or hear, and I know what you're going to choose, but how to sneeze after you've given birth twice.
Yeah.
And dilated, well, women, we all identify, most of us anyway. So
I can't.
And it was, no, you wouldn't. And it's really charming writing. It's very gritty but charming.
Thank you.
So I'm going to let you choose one. I actually chose a similar one because I really loved it. So go ahead, tell us about it and then read it for us.
Okay, so this one is called Watching You Sleep in the Early Morning. It's actually about my son, and I wrote it before my daughter was born, so he's the eldest, and I was just watching him sleep in the morning and sort of falling in love with him again and again, and wanted to kind of capture the feeling of that, how he looked, and also the feeling that, like, I know at some point I'm not going to be able to lay and snuggle in bed with him in the morning and stare at him, right? So this is really what this poem was born out of. So, watching you sleep in the early morning. You don't feel the tear that falls from my eye into the curve of your perfect blonde curl. It holds for an instant, clear and true, before relaxing into the arms of your hair. I gently lift a long eyelash from your chocolate dirty cheek, hold it on the tip of my finger, and wish that all the wishes you ever wish come true. That I could hold you forever on the tip of my finger, in the clear of my tear, in the soul of my heart, so you don't feel the pain of me letting you go, to grow, to know, to love.
I could just applaud. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful.
I'm really
trying
beautiful.
hard not to cry.
Yes, and anyone who has ever loved a child would be so moved by that.
Yeah.
It really is.
That's a
quite
legacy
lovely.
for your son.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
it
gorgeous,
is.
Yeah, he's not allowed to read this book yet. But
well, I can
suppose I could
understand
read
that.
one.
I'm going to get you to read in a minute, Peter, but I wanted to say to you, you use your husband, Nick,
Yes,
in some of your poetry.
I do.
And he's your husband,
Yeah.
so there are intimate things in the
Yes.
book. How does he think? What does he think about it?
So typically he doesn't really read the work. Mostly he reads it when everybody else does, and we just have, he trusts me, and I trust him, and he always says, if you're going to write about me, especially certain parts of our relationship, please write that
Make me
I'm the
look
best, and I have the best body, and I give you all the pleasure that you need, and I don't have to lie about any of that. But no, there's a total trust there, and so he gives me the freedom to express whatever I want to, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and that's not what it's about for me. So usually everything is an expression in some sort of love, and funny. I really like things are funny.
Yes.
Stuff our bodies do is funny. Sex is funny. Parenting is hilarious, and so I think that in the deep stuff there needs to be room to breathe and laugh, and he lets me do that. With him.
And the book does all of that.
Yes, yeah.
It really does. Peter, like I did with Vanessa's book, I flagged so many lovely, lovely pieces in your book. You could feel some of the family, so much of the family feeling, or that interaction of family in this book, and water fight. And there's a whole lot of there's so much warmth in it. But one that I'm so glad you've chosen is one that I think I reread about 3 times. So you tell us about it and read it for us, would you?
Well, this is a poem about my mother's village in Croatia, where she was born, a town called Primošten. So if you have a chance to go up the Adriatic coast, ever stop in Primošten. It's really beautiful, and I'll let the poem speak for itself. The poem's called Adriatic Mountains. In my mother's village, the church stands at the top of the hill, its whitewashed walls stripped shamelessly by the indelicate touch of briny winds, while immodest windows wrench themselves free from casements cracked with age. The old gray clock, numbed into stubborn silence, wears an embarrassed grin and stares blindly out to sea. The small Gothic steeple, the triumph of some deceased generation, points an indignant finger at the innocent morning breaking in blue. And far, far below, beneath this ancient peace, an army of old women parading in their best black undertake their private pilgrimages and collect like dust under the foot of this bloodless Calvary, brandishing prayers unsheathed in strategic anticipation of one united assault on God. Rumor has it, he's resting.
Again, applause, applause.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful, and it's so descriptive, and you can see it. I mean, I love writing when you can, it's like a movie in your head as you listen to the words. It's just really, really lovely. You're a very busy lawyer. When do you write?
Late at night. I don't watch a lot of TV, or early in the morning. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I close the door and I just, decompress, and I write a few lines. I don't see them for maybe days, weeks, sometimes years, but all comes together.
And you, Vanessa? You're a very busy mother.
Yeah, at first I wrote in very small, short, inconsistent chunks of time, but as the kids have grown up and they started school and my work life has shifted, my not writing work life, I should say, now if I schedule things well, I could have 3 days a week where I could get about 4 or 5 hours of writing in. And that's not typical at all, but I still feel like I write in the in-betweens. But I always have a pen and paper with me wherever I go, and I'm always writing like lines and stuff down, and then like Peter, I'll go back to it and visit it, finish a poem, and then. But other times, last night I wrote 9 poems.
Wow.
In about 2 hours. But I was thinking about them for weeks, and I sort of gave myself the deadline, and some time opened up last night, and it just all kind of spewed out of me. So it's consistent inconsistency.
It's
That's
very
when I write.
exciting when it happens like that, when you get that rush of inspiration, and there's nothing to stop you when you can sit and do it.
Sometimes, you're thinking, is this really good? I don't know. And like often I'll just, bounce them off my wife, and Denise will read them and just say, wow, you got something here.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're your own worst critic, and you've got to just sort of just venture, beyond the boundaries and let somebody else take a look at it.
Yeah.
A good editor is always great for writing.
Oh, yeah.
It's always good to
Yes.
have somebody else, and I've been very,
Yeah.
very fortunate the last 2 books to have good editors to
Yeah.
look, because otherwise, if you do it yourself, yeah, but they push you. They really do push you hard.
Yeah.
I find I have 2 brothers who are serious critics. So the book of poetry I'm working on is centered in Newfoundland. And so my Newfoundland brothers, of course, if it's something that just doesn't gel with them, they're scathing, but lovingly scathing.
Right.
But you're right. You sort of run it by them,
Yeah.
and that critique
Yeah.
makes you rethink it, even though the sentiment's the same, but it's the expression of it.
Yeah, I mean, and you kind of have to, because you have it in your head, you have the feeling and all the senses, like the sensual feeling of that in your head, and you know the backstory and the context, and you have to give it to somebody else who has nothing to do with that. And they may catch that context or not. They're definitely going to catch typos and like grammar stuff. And they'll also be able to say, I don't really understand what you're trying to say, or this is the best part of it. And yeah, it's integral to the process of writing good anything that you have an editor. Absolutely.
And it's a good thing, too, when you look at a poem that you wrote several years ago and say, gee, I'd like to rewrite it.
Yeah.
It's like rereading your favorite book. It changes, with time. You may not rewrite that poem because it is in itself, a piece of art. But the fact that you even want to think about redoing it means that you're growing as an artist, as a writer.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice for a young writer, someone who has all that poetry in them?
Well, I agree with what Vanessa says. Bring a book with you everywhere you go, a blank book just to write. Write everything. Just write it down. Work with it. Rework with work it. Read other poets. Go to poetry readings. Go to art galleries. Anything that sort of can influence and inspire you. And just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to put your words, in writing. Whether it's just for yourself or for, a publisher in the future, you never know what may happen in your life. It may take some time. It took me a long time before I really sat down and did an actual manuscript, but it's better late than never. But just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you have to read and you have to write. I know, I speak to kids all the time in classrooms, and they're just, they think there's going to be some big, huge trick to everything, after they ask you how much money you make.
Yes.
And you say, well, I'm rich. But yeah, you have to read and you have to write. And I always compare it to sports. If you're going to be a basketball player, you have to practice the sport, and you have to study other people who have done it before you or who are doing it with you, and you have to practice with your teammates. It's exactly the same with writing or doing any kind of art. You have to study the art that you want to write like or create, and you have to do it every day. Not once a week, not on the weekends. You have to do it every day.
Never a day without a word.
Yeah.
So very quickly, what's next for both of you?
I actually have a new collection of poetry coming out in the fall. It's launching in September, so we're very close to, we just chose a title today, and we're working on ordering, but in the next couple of weeks I have to work on the cover and synopsis and all that stuff, so that's what's coming up for me. Super excited.
I'm working on another poetry manuscript and several short stories and a couple of plays. So I'm kind of venturing into other areas, and I've done some plays in the past. And I'm working also on a wonderful collaboration with Marty Gervais called Marty Gervais Presents, where we're presenting poets, spoken word, and music.
Yeah.
So watch for that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. But before we go, remind people where they can get your books.
You can get both of our books
Yes.
at Biblioasis down in Walkerville, and at our publisher's website, Black Moss Press.
Thank you again. I'm so looking forward to seeing more of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for another show. Don't forget, you can find Peter and Vanessa's books at Biblioasis and online at Black Moss Press. We'd love to keep in touch, and I'd love to hear from you to recommend a writer, even if you are the writer. So email me, Veronique at therightstuff.tv, and visit our website, www.therightstuff.tv. Thanks for joining me. I'm Veronique Mandel. See you soon.